Hello, and welcome to the first Ask an Apologist live stream from Apologetics Inc. My name is Matthew Mittelberg. I'm a speaker and director of content for the ministry, and we're joined here by Mike Sherrard, who is our president and our leader, our fearless leader of this organization. And hopefully Alycia Wood will be able to join us later. We're having a little bit of technical difficulties getting her on tonight. Please be patient with us, as this is our first time using this technology to live stream to you, so that you can participate, so that you can ask whatever questions that you are dealing with, the questions that you are asking yourself or that others are asking you about your faith, so that we can grow towards truth together. So if you want to ask your questions tonight, you can put your questions in the chat box. Whether you're watching on Facebook or you're on YouTube, you can put your questions in the chat. All of the chats are being pulled together and put on our stream so that we can see them. So go ahead and put a comment in right now if you have a question that you would like to get us started with, and we're going to get started here pretty soon. Mike, is there anything you'd like to say about tonight?
Just that I'm glad you're hosting this and not me. I just came from a baseball practice, rolling in here. I'm in my home office here, of course, and which is connected to my bedroom. There is no guarantee that I will not have a kid bust through this door at any point, and they might not have clothes on because they maybe get out of a bath, and it doesn't matter that they know I'm in a meeting or whatever. So just get ready for whatever. And as the host, I can just blame you. This is your responsibility. So,
Yeah, that would be my fault, wouldn't it be?
well,
Yeah.
I mean, that's the way it works, man. The host gets all the crud.
All right, that's how it goes. Great. Well, go ahead and put those questions in the chat, and we will go ahead and answer those. But to start us off tonight, we had a couple questions that were submitted in advance, and so I want to start with a question that I think a lot of people have had, and a lot of young adults, when I've talked to them and had conversations with them about their faith, they ask this question: how do I know that Christianity is true specifically? Not any other religion, and why should I think that Christianity above and over any other religion or worldview is true? Mike, do you want to just get us started with that question and just give us some thoughts on that?
Yeah, I get asked that question, of course, all the time when I travel and speak. They want to know why I believe that Christianity is true, and they'll make a claim like, if you grew up in another country and you were raised in another religious faith, wouldn't you probably be of another religion? And the honest answer is maybe, but that doesn't mean that just because I was raised in a certain environment, my beliefs about God are true. It's true that in this country, I grew up surrounded by a lot of Christians, especially the time in which I grew up. My mom and dad were faithful believers in Jesus Christ. They lived and acted as if God was real. This wasn't just a cultural thing for them, like they just did it on Sundays. And so from a very early age, I was taught that God existed and Christianity had the correct view of who this God is and how to relate to him and whatnot. And I believed it initially because it was taught to me. Now, over the course of my life, I certainly began to have questions. And one of the things that I found within Christianity is that it is not a religion that is based on just trust me. Like this Wizard of Oz kind of idea of don't look behind the curtain because you're going to see that there's nothing there. What I have found regarding Christianity is that not only do the questions that I have an answer and a good answer, not just some kind of religious, uh, you know, religious, what's the phrase? What I'm trying to look for, some religious gimmicky kind of, empty
Sophistry.
sophistry, empty persuasion, right? There you go. I found really good answers to my questions. And I think that the Christian worldview actually best accounts for the nature of reality. And so what I have found to be the case with Christianity is it's not true simply by virtue of my beliefs and that I want it to be true. I have found it to be true in an objective sense. And the questions that I've had have they've found good answers within the Christian worldview.
Hmm. That's great, Mike, and I love the way that you put that. I've had a similar experience just as I've investigated Christianity. I've investigated the world religions to try to evaluate what makes the best sense of reality, what has the most cohesive picture. And I've been convinced just that not only does Christianity have that best picture, but also it's supported by the evidence, the claims that it makes. For example, the historical claim that Jesus existed, that he died on the cross, that he rose from the dead. Those sorts of claims are backed up by evidence that comes from without Christianity. Outside of Christianity, other experts, other historians will agree to those things that aren't Christians, and that gives me confidence to know that Christianity is true. So looks like Alycia is joining us, which is great. Let's welcome Alycia. There she is. Awesome. Thanks for joining us, Alycia.
Yeah, so happy that it worked out. I don't know what was going on, but thanks. I'm glad to get to be with you all.
Awesome. Great. Well, we have a question here. Is this being recorded? And yes, this is being recorded. So this is great. So we have a question here from Donnie. Donnie is asking, how do we help our families when we've become disillusioned with the church? And I think this is a big question in today's culture because we see more and more pastors who have fallen away, leaders who have had moral failings, and sometimes that leads us to be disillusioned with the church. And so I think a lot of people are kind of wrestling with this. How do we deal with this?
Well, I mean, I totally relate. I think that there's certain times when I see Christians do things that I just kind of feel like I just want to go be a Christian by myself. And it's just, when you do life with people, you get dirty and things get difficult and things can be stressful. And so I completely relate this idea of being disillusioned with the church with various things that people have experienced. And so, first of all, I would never say that the church gets it right all the time. The church is supposed to represent Jesus in everything, and we don't always do that well. And so I would just say, first of all, recognize that any person in the church should be asking you to follow Jesus and not a pastor or any kind of spiritual leader or any elder or any teacher, anybody like that. Ultimately, that's who you want to follow. And just know that not every church experience is going to be negative, like, or I think sometimes we have these bad experiences, we feel like it's just always going to be this way, like it's just never not going to be. I'm never going to find a place that I can find a home at. And that may be true, or you may be at a place for 5-10 years before things get tricky. But just know we're doing life with people, and ultimately all people in the church should be striving to move in a pathway to be more and more like Christ, help people to understand who he is, being true followers of him. And so if you feel disillusioned by the church, my overall advice is try again, try another place. Don't it's too big of a Christianity, God has too big of an impact on your life for you to throw it away or to just walk away because some people couldn't behave or couldn't do things right. And I would hate for you to suffer that loss.
Yeah, I get the question. I've grown up in the church. I pastored for many years, and I know the joys and the pains of belonging to a church. I think one of the ways forward for those that have been hurt and disillusioned or whatever is they need to see people that are honest about their experience with the church, the fullness, the good and the bad. And because a lot of times in church, there's this pressure to just go along with the flow and don't be real. Don't be honest. Don't admit that you have doubts. Don't admit that you've been hurt. Certainly don't admit that you're struggling with depression. What's wrong with you? Don't you pray enough? Don't you just sing a little bit louder? Come on. So I think people are looking for a little bit of honesty and realness within the church, which is hard. And this is where I'll be careful about not getting on a soapbox. The way a lot of our churches are built doesn't facilitate, openness and even good relationships. They're event driven, program driven. You come, you sit in a dark building so that you're not distracted. And I always go, distracted from what? Other people who have the same hope as me? Why do I not want to be distracted by them singing the same, expressing the same hope that I do through song? I think it's ridiculous. anyways, our churches aren't often structured such that we can get to know anybody or anybody gets to know us. So what that means is you're probably going to have to do this in non quote unquote church settings. You're going to have to invite people over to your home, share meals together, be honest, hear their story, tell your story. And then also just remember that though there may be manifestations of the church in our day, the way that we quote unquote do church, that are harmful or hurtful. But when you look at how the New Testament describes the people of God and what we have and what the privilege it is to be God's people and to be the church, it's quite remarkable. And it's shameful that we have such a poor vision of the church. And again, when I say we have a poor vision, it's not any one person's fault almost. It's not like I'm just blaming pastors, or I'm just not blaming big churches or mega churches. We live in a day where there is a very paltry, imaginative view of the church. But when you look at the New Testament, the bride of Christ, a holy priesthood, a holy nation, and the different imaginative language used to describe people that we are part of, the church is this remarkable gift and blessing that has been given to us. So I don't know, way forward for those that have been hurt by it. I think small steps in relationship, and whether if that begins around your dinner table before it's in the pews, so to speak, I think that can be a helpful way forward.
Great. Thank you guys for those answers. Really, really helpful. We have a question here from Echo, who says this: how do you answer to someone asking directly, are you saying I'm going to hell? And she follows up with specifically somebody that you care about deeply.
First, do not trust a question from Echo. I know this woman, and she is not a trustworthy person. She's aggressive, and she's got an agenda always. So I'm gonna let you take that, Matthew, because I know what you're getting set up for.
All right. It sounds like there's some personal issues here, but we're gonna bypass some of those and try our best to help Echo, despite her bad motives. So this question: how do you answer somebody? Are you saying I'm going to hell? And I think this is a really pointed question, because often when you are talking with people and they are not a Christian, or they don't specifically believe in God, the idea of hell is offensive, right? It's an offensive idea because we don't really understand it, and we see it as God being judgmental. We see it as him picking and choosing. We see it as this sort of arbitrary system that God set up. Like if you go to church and you do these things, then you get to enjoy eternity forever in heaven, and if not, then he's just gonna capriciously send you to hell. And it's not what it really is. And what I would want to say to somebody who's asking this question is to say, I sure hope not. Like, that's not the heart of God. That's not what he wants for you. What he wants for you is to save you. He wants to have a relationship. He wants for you to have ultimate satisfaction and peace and joy forever in eternity. But the question is, can you do that apart from him? And the answer is no. He is the source of all goodness, joy, life, and peace. And so if you reject him, then you're rejecting the source of all goodness, joy, life, and peace. You are saying no to those things. And that's what hell is. It's a self-chosen identity apart from God. And so, yes, if you reject God, then yeah, you will have this experience called hell. We can talk about, whether the metaphors used in Scripture ought to be taken literally for the burning lake of fire and all of those kinds of things. But we don't want to shy away from the fact that hell is just an awful, awful, awful thing for anyone to experience. But God is willing that none should perish, but that all should turn to Christ. He desires a relationship with you. And so that's what my message would be to this person is, yes, if you continue in rejection of God, that's why I care. That's why I care enough to tell you this message that Jesus loves you. It's because I don't want you to go to hell. I don't want you to be separated from God. I don't want you to fail to receive his free gift of salvation. So I hope that's helpful for you, Echo, despite your apparently terrible motives for asking
Well,
this question.
there's also a bit, and maybe I'm reading the question wrong, but when it's a family member and the question is, are you saying I'm going to hell? There's an element of personal, something that's personal here. It feels like an attack. And a helpful response may be something like, I'm not saying anything. This is what I've come to believe is true. And this is the view that Jesus held. And if you think I have a wrong understanding about God or the Bible, I'm happy to explore that with you. What do you think Jesus's teaching regarding hell was? Now, maybe this person isn't a Christian, and the conversation needs to be, just more fundamental about. So, what do you think about? What do you believe about God in general? But in a sense, this isn't a subjective truth claim that I'm making here. It's not that I am saying you are going to hell. I've come to understand the nature of reality and who God is, and most clearly revealed in the life and teaching of Jesus Christ. And this was a view that Jesus clearly held in the New Testament. And if you think that I'm wrong or misguided about that, I would love to have the conversation with you, because I certainly don't have any ill will towards you. I love you. And this is what I think Jesus taught. And that's why I'm giving it to you. So maybe a way to lessen the personal kind of attack that might be felt by the other person, even though I doubt, Echo, you used any language that would make somebody feel like that. Just because it's family, it just may feel like that almost by default. So
yeah,
That's
just
a
to
great
add
addition.
a quick cherry on top, because those were great. I think one question I might ask back to somebody who asked me that question, that are you saying going to hell? I guess my question is, are you saying you want to go to heaven? Because that is ultimately, like, when you think about what heaven is, it's closeness with God for all of eternity. And if you don't want him now, then is heaven really going to be enjoyable for you? Is that even something that you actually want? And if you're saying that you do want to go to heaven, great, let's have a conversation about Jesus, because that we can do something about.
That's great.
That's
really good. We have a really important question here that I think every person asks this question, which is, my sons want to know how Matthew keeps his hair perfectly in place.
I'll give you the answer to that. He hasn't met life yet. He doesn't have kids. That's why he has hair and the time to fix it.
It's very true. It's very true. Actually, I just woke up like this. I just woke up and it was just perfect. No, a magician never reveals his secrets. So we're going to just leave that a mystery. One of the great mysteries of our faith. So
The Trinity
yes,
and Matthew's hair. Those are the mysteries.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for asking that question. We've got a question here. In our Gen Z youth discipleship group, students struggle with how to navigate politics as a Christian. The polarization, the division, even within the church on this issue. People seem to be more pro-Republican or pro-Democrat than they are pro-Christ. Advice to help guide teens with this.
Who wants to go first on that?
Well, I mean, I can say a couple things and then, let you guys bail me out if I commit us to any political party or any person. No, I was trying to pull up a quote real quick, but I think I know it enough. But one of the things that Michael Ware, who used to work for President Obama, I believe, in his faith council or something like that. I'm sorry if I'm butchering that, but he has a really good quote. And he said, the problem with Christians in America is not that we are politically homeless. It's that we thought we could find a home in politics at all. And I think that's always been really helpful for me. You're right. Christians tend to land on, there's actually a sense where if you don't vote a certain way, then you must not be Christian. And we've kind of put these labels on people as if America, number one, is always going to exist. And if you're a Christian, you know that there's going to be a whole new heaven and new earth, and America is not going to exist. So we are essentially trying to save a sinking ship. But also the fact that it's almost like we can make politicians our saviors, as if Jesus isn't enough. And that's the thing that concerns me the most, is anytime we elevate somebody to the position where it seems like we almost worship that. And that happens across politics all around. So This is what I would say. I would to guide teens who are struggling with this whole political stuff, and it's probably going to get worse. We have another election coming up, so everybody buckle down and get ready. But here is the thing. The reality is I think that the Christian views are probably spread out amongst a variety of different people that are running and even political parties. I don't think you could say 100% of Christian views fall in one camp or the other. And so voting can be very, very difficult because you feel like you're maybe trying to pick the lesser of two evils in a sense, and that can be really hard. So I think the thing that we have to keep in mind is you vote for who you think is going to be okay, who you think will be the best way. Jesus was not American, so he didn't vote. So just keep that in mind, okay? He's not Republican, he's not Democrat, he's not independent, he's not Green Party, he's not libertarian. Like, he was not here to go and cast a vote. And when he was on earth, was not interested in changing the government of Rome. So keep in mind, ultimately, our large focus should always be on the things that last. America won't, but souls do. And that has to be our focus, is focusing on the individual people whose lives will continue on. And we should never let, wherever we get into these conversations with politicians, politics, we should never let that cause us as a church body to lose our focus of why we are here. We weren't told to vote a certain way, Republican or vote Democrat. We were told to make disciples. And that has to be our focus no matter what's happening. Our home isn't here.
Yeah. And to that, not the but, the and to Alicia's remark is that as followers of Jesus Christ, we are to be good stewards of the land in which God has placed us. And in our time in history, we have a very unique style of government, probably one of the best governments in an objective sense that has existed, that has led to freedom and flourishing for a vast number of people. So of course it's not without its flaws and its mistakes and its evils throughout its time. So the question for the follower of Jesus Christ right now is, how am I to be a good steward of my citizenship in this land and seek the good of my neighbor? And that will involve politics. So Christians should have informed views in politics, and not just national politics, local politics. Often we forget that sometimes the best our greatest contribution to the well-being of our neighbor can be at the local level, not the national level. And so Christians should be involved in politics in all spheres, but especially local ones. And I think we would all agree that the Christian worldview should inform your political choices. And though Alycia is right that there's not a Christian party, there are certainly going to be times where one party's platform or candidate more closely aligns with a biblical worldview. And I think Christians are morally obligated to seek the good of their neighbor through their voting choices. So this isn't an arbitrary thing. And though, seeking the salvation of our fellow neighbors, brothers, our neighbors, is of ultimate value, it does not negate things of value that are maybe not ultimate value. And so the well-being of this country and our fellow citizens is a high priority of Christians. Now, one quick thing about that, though, and this could really turn into a longer discussion, but one of the reasons why politics is so polarizing or so challenging right now is everything is political. And this is a recent phenomenon in our country's history. There's no such thing as the apolitical. And again, this is a much longer discussion that we can go into, but Carl Trueman does a really good job talking about this in his book, The Rise and the Triumph of the Modern Self, for those of you that are interested in things like this. But everything is political now. Everything down to sexuality and gender. So your notion of who am I as a human being is now political. So everything's political. And that's why it's really contested. Moreover, we're living in a time in history where we're lacking a shared vision of what is true and the tools to pursue truth civilly. And when we don't have those tools in place, all that's left for us to grab is power. If I can't persuade you that my vision of truth is the right one, or my notion of good is correct, all that I have left at my disposal is to grab power and silence you. And that is the world that is the world that is forming around us, if you will, in this country. So a practical way forward with politics just needs to be the ability for us to listen to those that don't think like us, build relationships with people that don't agree with us, and with respect and gentleness, pursue truth together. instead of just seeking power to shut up those people that don't think like we do. So actually, this is what I'm going to be talking about Thursday night down at Bay Hope in Tampa. So if anybody's watching in the area, come on out. I'll love to see you there.
That's great, Mike. We have a follow-up question here that touches on something I wanted to say, which I loved both of what you guys just said. Robert says, but can't you make a strong biblical case on abortion, gay marriage, the importance of the family, and a few other things? And I think the answer is yes, you can. I think these are, but here, notice the thing here is these are not political parties. These are not even political policies. These are values. And we're talking about the issues here. And I think so often what happens is we have people that get so tied up in a political party that they are so committed to the party over even the policies that party makes and what the values that party is actually representing. So I think one of the clearest ways that we can provide a good path forward as Christians is to get very clear on what our values are, why we are supporting the things that we are, why we are doing things the way that we do them. And we should be crystal clear on those kinds of things, as opposed to being fully devoted to a political party, which is going to be fallible. They're going to make mistakes. They're going to do some things well and some things not very well. And so I think our commitment should be to the values. And then you ask the question, which party will, or which politician or which policy will best fulfill and uphold this value that I'm valuing. And you can do that on a case-by-case basis. Which is really liberating. You don't actually have to.
Yeah, it's harder to do that
commit.
on a case-by-case basis these days, though.
It's
becoming increasingly more polarized. And so, yeah, Robert, or I wonder if you go by Bob. Can I call you Bob? No, I'm going to stick with. I'm going to stick with Robert. So, I mean, I think I can just assume where you're coming from on this. And more often than not, I think that the Republican Party does align more closely with a Christian worldview. And now, again, it's not the case every time. And that's not also to say that if you are a Democrat, you're not a Christian. But the world in which we live right now, the political parties and their divide, even down to their theory of law. If you were to read the Republican platform from the previous election, their very concept of law and where rights come from align with a biblical worldview, whereas the Democratic Party is adopting a view of rights that is state given, that the state is what grants rights, and it's even things like that. So yeah, the follower of Jesus Christ should be very discerning on these matters. And to Matthew's point, we need to be able to articulate with gentleness and respect why we believe what we believe, and never to be beholden to a political party, of course, never to view our Savior to be someone from this nation, but we are fundamentally citizens of heaven, and from there our Savior comes. That isn't to say that there aren't clear choices in the world that we live from a political standpoint. And one last thing, just on a nuanced position there, when it comes to things like abortion, gay marriage, and the importance of family, we have to be very careful about how we argue for our beliefs in a civil society. We don't argue. This isn't our argument for abortion or gay marriage. The Bible says so, therefore it should be law. That's not going to work. And that's actually not even fully our position. You can appeal to natural law to make a case for abortion and things like a traditional view of marriage, that we believe that marriage should be between one man and one woman because it is inherently good and it's for the well-being of children and the good of society. And you can make an argument there without even appealing to the Bible, which is important because a lot of people will just dismiss the Christian viewpoint in politics because they say, oh, you can't force your religion on anybody. It's like, well, no, that's not what I'm saying here. This view is in line with my religion, but I'm making an argument here, not really relying on the Bible. I'm making an argument using philosophy, just like you're using an argument based on philosophy. And you can't just prejudicially dismiss my view because I'm a Christian and I believe in God. You have to dismiss my argument based on its own merits, not just because of where it came from, that commits something like the genetic fallacy. So anyhow, this really could get into a long discussion, but maybe a summary statement on this is that the Christian worldview does not end at the Capitol steps. The Christian worldview should inform our decisions when it comes to politics. We should never be beholden to a particular party. There is nuance here to be pursued. And above all, we need to do it with gentleness and respect, seeking to honor God in all we do and demonstrate to our neighbor that we love them. And we're not just these political, militant, brainless idiots, which that's what we communicate very often.
Good word, Mike. Good stuff.
When I'm not the host, man, you don't know what I'm going to say. I'm going to start. You have to put a governor on me. I'm going to.
No, you say whatever you want to. That's great. That's great. I want to go back to one of the previously submitted questions, because I think this is something that a lot of young people are dealing with is, does God hear me when I pray? And if so, why don't I hear God speak back to me? And I think that's something that I think I asked when I was younger. How do I know that God's really hearing me? I think a lot of young people are asking that question. Why don't I hear the voice of God speaking back to me? What would you guys say to that kind of question?
I would say, first of all, I totally get that. I think that there's been times when you feel like, number one, God isn't talking to me and I'm asking him to talk to me and communicate to me. And if he doesn't, then there's a sense of even feeling like, I don't know, like betrayal or like you don't care, like abandonment. And that can be really hard to even say, well, I want to keep trying, because you just feel like I'm asking you. I think one of the things that's helped me is to realize that God doesn't necessarily speak in the way that I'm expecting him to. So I used to think, okay, if I just sit here and just like close my eyes and just wait, he'll talk to me. And that rarely works for me, mostly because after about 4 seconds, my mind has wandered off and I'm thinking about something else. And then I bring it back as I get frustrated. Okay, I'm gonna focus again. And then it wanders off again. And it does this cycle like 8 times. And I just get frustrated, right? And like it doesn't work. And so what I've come to realize is the Lord speaks to me in the chaos of my head. In other words, I don't have to be just like perfectly still and focus on him, which is just stressing me out because I can't seem to accomplish that. But I'll be in the midst of doing something and I just get like this massive download, like a paragraph that just drops in my head. And I'm like, wait a minute. And all of a sudden I'm like, okay, like that was the Lord, because I can tell because of the way, maybe it was something I was thinking about, or maybe something I was praying about. And so what I've come to realize is that God speaks oftentimes in ways we don't realize. It could be you're thinking about something, you feel like me. Like there was one time where I felt like that was God, but I wasn't really sure. And then I just opened up the Bible to read it. And I just happened to open up to this exact same verse that I just felt God speaking to me. And I was like, okay, that was God then. So now I've learned, like, in other words, I've learned how he speaks to me as I've gone on in my Christian walk. It wasn't always clear in the beginning, but I've learned as I move on. There's other times he'll speak to you through a person, like somebody will come up to you and say, the Lord is saying this. And I've had that where there was something going on in my head, and then somebody comes to me and says the exact same thing that God just said, like refers like the same verse or something. You're like, what in the world? So there's a variety of ways. And so I guess my thing, what I would say to someone who maybe just feels a bit frustrated with that, is I don't think there's one system. God speaks through his word. He speaks in your life through things that are going on. He'll speak through a different person. And you will learn how he communicates to you, and you'll learn the voice of God as you go along. And sometimes you'll get it wrong, but that's just part of anything. And I think the stress of having to get it all right, and I've got to hear God's voice and I got to work really hard, is what actually pushes you away from even wanting that experience. And so I would just encourage you, don't get discouraged. The Lord can break through whatever's going on and communicate to you. So I would encourage you just to keep going.
Yeah. And I think other people help. Like even Alycia, you and I were talking on the phone yesterday about things like intuition or the Holy Spirit's leading. How do we know this? Often it's other people helping you to understand the way that God works and he speaks. And this is a challenging question to me. Even yesterday in my prayer time, I'm like, God, why are you so hidden from me? Like it was a very personal one. Just, get up yesterday morning, read my Bible, and just, the grief that we all feel over just whatever. And it's just like, God, why, right? Mm-hmm. Why are you hidden? Why don't you just shout to me? Mm-hmm. Do something louder than a still small voice that's I'm missing or whatever. Yeah. And I don't have the best answers to that. It's just one of those questions that even nags at me some. I do know this though, that in our stubbornness, I think even loud voices are easy to dismiss or ignore. And often we want to see, we're inclined to see what we want to see, and stubbornness and pride and sin gets in the way. And even if God were to come down in flesh,
Hmm.
people would still reject him.
Mm.
So if that has been true historically, I'm probably sure it's true for me. I don't know that I'm that different from everybody else, right? So I think there's something there that, a lot of times when we're like, why isn't God speaking to me? It's like, I want God to speak. We have this ignorance of thinking, if God would speak to me in that way, I would get it. And that's probably just not the case. So it's in humility, learning to hear from God in the way and manner in which he chooses to speak. And one of the keys that I found to do that is in community. Other people help me to understand when God is speaking to me.
That's great. Really good. I love the part in I can't remember which gospel it's in, but Jesus is in Jerusalem right before he's going to be crucified, and the Father speaks from heaven and says, "This is my son, listen to him." And people go, "Did you guys hear that thunder?" And they don't listen to the voice. They're not listening. They're not ready to hear what God has to say. And so I think you're right, Mike. Sometimes we just think, oh, if God only did this in this way. And God actually knows what's best for us and how to communicate with us best. And often the silence and the still small voice, learning to listen to that is what builds our faith. It helps us to grow. It helps us to actually learn to grow in dependence on God instead of dependence on ourselves. So really, really good word on that.
Hey, Alycia, I know you speak on the hiddenness of God. Not to put you on the spot or to press a question that you're like, let's move on from it. But you have anything else to say on the hiddenness of God?
No, because that's more focused on people who seek him and feel like he's far away versus the voice of God. Yeah.
Okay.
But
Great.
even that, it can be challenging. I mean, that's the point. Sorry, Matthew, cut you off. Even that is challenging, right? I mean, the reality is we seek and we pursue, and it can be hard, but God does want to be known. He does want to talk to us. He does want us to hear. It isn't just, we just think sometimes it should be easier than it is. But there's nothing that says that it is going to be easier. We just make these assumptions.
Just to say too on that, I think sometimes we assume, atheists will ask the question, why doesn't God just appear to me? If he wants me to believe in him, why doesn't he just do this very simple thing? And I think part of the answer is God doesn't just want you to believe in him. He doesn't want you to just be aware of his existence. He wants you to have a relationship based on love and based on faith. And so, God will reveal himself in different ways to different people. Some people do have a direct vision of God. Actually, there are incredible stories of people who have had those kinds of visions and direct experiences with God. But I've also heard of people who have had visions of God exactly the way that they asked for them, and they reject God because of that.
Yeah.
And they say, I'm just not willing to believe based on that. Richard Dawkins even said, he was in an interview, and the interviewer asked him, is there anything that could convince you of God's existence? And he said, well, maybe if, God wrote my name in the clouds and told me to believe in him. But even then I would probably just think it was a hallucination. So in reality, I'm not open to any evidence. And that was a pretty honest admission from a guy who, claims to be an evidential, following the evidence. He's saying no matter what God does, he's just not open. And that's a pretty, I think, poor way to do an investigation into the nature of reality. So, I think God knows what is best for us, and he desires relationship with us. He does, but he gives us a lot of signs and a lot of evidence for us to pursue, to seek him and to know him. And we love to talk about a lot of those things here at Apologetics Inc. So,
hey, can we real quick just also comment on Alicia's Bill's Mafia nonsense going on over here?
Yeah, I noticed that.
Yeah.
True fan here.
Yeah, thank you, Anna. Hi, Anna. Just so you all know, Anna is in England, so she's 5 hours ahead of East Coast.
Oh, sweet.
So she's like 1:40, whatever, in the morning, and it's so funny because Anna and I just know each other from like Twitter. Like we've never met. We just become Twitter buddies. But it's funny when I put this. I was thinking about her because I was like, Anna's probably going to see this. So it's funny she mentioned it. It was just a good color. Really, that's really what it was. It was a good color.
They beat
for
the
what we're doing.
Giants last night, right? Didn't they?
They did. I was stressing at like 11:30 at night. Yeah, it was like, are you serious? Like, it was just, come on and win this game already. Yeah, but they won barely.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's great. Why don't we take a quick break from the Q&A? And if you guys have questions, again, just a reminder, you can put those in the YouTube chat or the Facebook chat. We see them both. That last question was from YouTube for those of you on Facebook who are confused about what the question was. But you can put your questions in the chat and we will do our best to answer those questions. But also want to let you know about some upcoming events that we have coming up here. And I'm going to pull those up here so that you guys can see what's happening. Mike, do you want to talk about, well, first I'll talk about this one because this is the Faithful Witness Conference, which is happening October 27th and 28th in West Palm Beach, Florida. Palm Beach Atlantic University is where I graduated recently with my master's in philosophy of religion. And they have had, this is their second annual conference. So if you are in the area, this is a great opportunity to hear from speakers from all across the country and some even from the UK that are flying in to speak on a variety of topics. And it's just going to be an amazing evening and morning, Friday evening and Saturday morning. The QR code is right there. So if you're interested, you can scan that or go to pbaapologetics.com.
Yeah, that's a good
Mike,
school. Good school with some good programs. Good profs there too.
Absolutely. We got Paul Copan there, Paul Gould,
Yeah.
Brandon Rickabaugh. It's a great school. So Mike, do you want to talk about our Atlanta event?
Yeah, I'm thrilled. We're doing an event in my neighborhood, basically my backyard, and we're all going to be there. Matthew, you'll be there. Alycia will be there. Jenny Zamitas, Tom Woodward, who work with us at Apologetics Inc. will be there. Whole team will be there. So, all the team minus all the new people we're hiring right now because we planned this event before we started hiring all these other folks. So, it's going to be good. It's going to deal with, kind of how did we end up in this kind of morally chaotic world and what's the way forward? Alycia is going to be doing a talk on transgenderism. Matthew, of course, you're doing a talk on doubt and does doubt demand deconstruction? And I'm going to kind of give a talk that gives a broad framework of how did we end up in this situation and what's the way forward? So I'm really excited. What's it? 9 to 4, something like that. We'll break for lunch. There'll be a panel discussion at the end. Really looking forward to this. Tickets are only $10. Grab them before they're gone. So that's Fayetteville, Georgia. I said my neighborhood like y'all know where I live. So if you live in Georgia, come on out. You can get more info at apologetics.org.
Great. And then two quick things. These are not events, but these are things that are constantly happening. We have the Universe Next Door podcast, which has been running for quite a long time. Tom Woodward started it back in the 90s, the early 2000s, maybe. And it's hosted now by Nick Shalna, our team member. And he has an amazing lineup of speakers and professionals join him on that podcast. And he interviews them about a wide variety of theological topics, philosophical topics, apologetics topics. So if you like podcasts, if you like these kinds of conversations, be sure to check out the Universe Next Door podcast.
Yeah, Nick's great. Alycia, you're one of his biggest fans, aren't you?
I do listen to his podcast. Yeah.
That's awesome. I love that. Well, last and most important, we have my YouTube channel, which I started
features
just recently.
Humble Matthew Mittelberg.
Yes, exactly. So I just started this about a month ago, and it's something that I've been wanting to do for years now. But it's regular content coming out just about once a week on a variety of topics, short videos. 5 to 10 minutes long is kind of the format that I'm sticking with right now. But we'll see where that goes. We'll see if I get creative and decide to do other things. But that is linked on our YouTube channel. If you go to the other channels, it's right there on Apologetics Inc. Or you can go to youtube.com/@MatthewVMitt for more amazing content. So with that, let's return to our Q&A and keep going here. We've got Donnie who's saying woohoo for Copan and Gould. Yes, amen. Loved learning under both of them. Loved my program. So if you are interested in a master's in philosophy of religion or any kind of apologetics program, that is an excellent opportunity at PBA. We've got a question here that was asked a little while ago that was pretty thoughtful here and relevant to what we're dealing with right now. How should a Christian interact with the subject of Hamas, Palestine, Israel these days in serving Christ? Mike, you're welcome.
Yeah. Hey, how you doing, Dennis? Good to see that you're on with us tonight.
Just an easy little T-ball of a question. Just you go ahead and knock that out there, Mike, please.
Yeah, it's a tough one right now. It's affecting a lot of people. And just a quick plug. Yeah, Dennis is already plugging himself there with, you see how he logged in the discipleship dilemma. But no, that's Dennis's book. It's a great book. Dennis is several years ago, Dennis Allen. Well, I say several years ago. Maybe I got some of my facts wrong here. But the idea behind this book is what's going on in the church. Why are so many people walking out the doors? And Dennis's thesis is kind of the word discipleship. The idea of discipleship has been hacked or hijacked. And the church just isn't committed to making followers of Jesus Christ in the pattern or the example that Jesus laid down for us. So go check out Dennis's book. Dennis is a great guy and committed to some good work there.
This is great stalling, Mike. Good work. You're really giving yourself some time to think here.
You're such a punk, man. Why the heck did we ever hire you? You can't give away my secrets, man. You gotta learn how to. No,
I mean, I'm amazed. You're continuing to stall. This is fantastic. Wow, great job.
All right. So the question then. I think the starting place, and this isn't just true about this, but it's especially true about issues that people are grieving, and people are grieving. I was talking to somebody recently who had a daughter who is having a lot of anxiety over what's happening over there. And so one of the assumptions we make is that people are just incredibly informed on these views, and they're not, but they may be talking about them for various reasons, and just the anxiety and the grief that they cause. And a lot of people have to process out loud. And when it's emotional, it's going to be emotional, volatile language. And so I think the way that the Christian begins interacting on this subject is by us being peacemakers. Now, being a peacemaker doesn't mean you have to compromise on truth, but that means recognizing that people are more than the sum total of their ideas. And if somebody's reacting in a volatile manner about an important issue, let's throw a little bit of water on this. And one of the ways you throw water on a raging fire is to listen and ask really good questions. Seek understanding before you critique or advance your own position. And so on an issue like this that is, really sensitive, it's causing a lot of grief and a lot of anxiety, even amongst Christians. Like, does this mean Jesus is coming back next week? I haven't gotten married yet. And it can't happen now. And so there's just a lot of anxiety and hurt and grief, surrounding this issue. And more than just needing to make a point and make a post, find somebody, listen to them, understand why they're hurting, and together seek truth. And one of the great ways to seek truth is by learning how to ask really good questions, be insightful in that way. So yeah, on this issue and so many others, Christians do need to take the role of peacekeeper, which again does not mean compromising on truth, but it's about finding out how to pursue truth while honoring the other person as an image bearer of God and seeking truth together with gentleness and reason and respect.
Great word. Great word. We have a really good question here. I'll kind of start on this question, which is, what do you recommend as far as starting a good conversation with the Hindu family down the street? And this is, I love the heart behind this question. I love the fact that you're interested in starting that conversation, because so often when we have people that are Hindus or Muslims or people who are coming from an Eastern culture or Eastern religion, they are not often invited into homes. I remember Nabil Qureshi writing about that in Seeking Allah, Finding Jesus, that I don't remember the statistic, but it's a huge number of people are just never invited into a home, which is incredibly problematic for people from those cultures, because that is often the way that they receive hospitality. That's the way that they receive
Mhm.
kindness, is to be invited into a home, to be invited to share a meal together. That is one of the most important ways that you can build relationships. So to start a good conversation with the Hindu family down the street, invite them over for dinner. Invite them to bring some of their amazing food from their culture I'm assuming they're international here. Maybe they're not, but if they are, invite them to bring some of their food as well, and just share a meal together and just have a conversation about life, and let that flow in a spiritual direction naturally. Sometimes I think we assume that we just have to, as soon as we find out somebody's not a Christian, we just have to go for the jugular, just go straight in, go for the hardest, deepest apologetics questions. And that's not necessarily true.
Mhm.
Sometimes it's important to build relationship, to get to know somebody, to get to know their heart, to know what's important to them, to know how they think, before you go for some of those questions. Now, sometimes those conversations just come up naturally, and it's okay to go right for the spiritual questions. And also, important to say, sometimes you get to coast. People will coast in those relationships, and they won't ever bring up spiritual conversations because they're nervous about offending. They're nervous about getting into those kinds of conversations. So you don't want to do either of those things. Go straight for the jugular or coast. You want to meet them in the middle and just get to know somebody on a personal level. Do you guys have anything you want to add on that?
No, I think it
No,
was good.
that was good. And just be curious. It's funny how my answer here, I give an answer like this. I have a son with special needs, and people often don't, they just don't know what to do. They don't know what to say or what to ask. And I'm like, it's okay to be curious. Just ask a question. And so with somebody from a different faith, there's often that same factor, as you feel like you're walking on eggshells around them. And
Mm.
you're like, I can't be curious because I might offend you. Well, you might, but risk it.
Yeah.
And give somebody an opportunity to be gracious back to you. So be
Mhm.
curious about somebody in their Hindu faith. And again, seek understanding first before trying anything else. And many of the Eastern religions, you'll be fascinated by the rich history of philosophy undergirding some of these religions. Now, I don't think that that means that they're true, and they're misguided, but they are thinking religions, many of them. And
Mhm.
sometimes that gets missed when you think of Hinduism. You think of the tons of gods, and some of the practices seem strange to you, and you just kind of judge it as something silly or whatnot. People do that people do that regarding Christians, and Christians do that regarding people of other faiths. But there's often a depth to other religions that you aren't aware of that's interesting to learn. Again, it doesn't mean that they are true, but it's interesting to learn. So just be curious. And I love Matthew's answer. Invite them into your home. And when they're there, be curious, ask questions, and again, pursue truth together.
Mhm. That's great. And I think this ties into another question that's asked here on the flip side, from Felix. How much is the apologetics approach important in Muslim countries?
I
And
love that
I'll
question.
start on this. Yeah, this is so good. I have a friend who is a missionary in a Muslim country, and he said he uses apologetics all the time because, especially when you're talking with Muslims, they have very strong arguments that they make. They have very strong opinions about what Christians believe and the logical consistency of those beliefs, and they are very interested in talking about those kinds of things. And then they have their own arguments for Islam and the reasons that they give for those. So I think it's vitally important that you are familiar with the rational basis for Christianity if you are doing any kind of missions or any kind of evangelism in a Muslim context, or with Muslims, because often they know certain passages of Scripture better than Christians do,
Mm.
and they might not have the correct interpretation of those
Yeah.
passages, but they can quote those verses from memory, and they can quote passages of the Quran from memory. I know I mentioned Nabil Qureshi earlier,
Mhm.
and that's the way that he was. When he was a Muslim, he would go up to Christians and he would challenge their faith, and he would say, "Oh, you can't trust the Bible; it's been corrupted." And he would say, "The Trinity is a contradiction." And later where he sought the truth on those answers, and he actually came to believe in Christ. He actually disagreed with those arguments, but it was because he encountered a Christian who actually knew what he was doing and actually was well trained in apologetics, and he was able to answer those questions for him. So that's not to say every apologetics conversation or any conversation with a Muslim is going to be about apologetics, but I think it's vitally important.
Yeah, and one thing to be careful about, and this isn't just true of a Muslim, is it's true of any person. Don't make the mistake of assuming you know what they believe.
Yes.
Probably there's some good literature out there on the notion of folk religion, which means like a common practice of a religion that's actually kind of disconnected from the actual beliefs of that religion. And there's some compelling research out there that argues that most people actually practice folk religion, not a true religion. So we know regarding Christianity, like what are the studies, right? That Gen Z has, 4% of Gen Z has a biblical worldview, which far more than 4% of Gen Z identify as Christian, but so few actually hold a biblical worldview. And it doesn't get much better throughout the generations. Barna's been finding consistently for years that around 20% of professing evangelicals actually hold a biblical worldview. So they're practicing some kind of folk religion, some kind of creation of their own. And so when using apologetics, you got to be careful, because you don't want to just come out of the gate just swinging with all of your arguments and find yourself in the position where it's like, wait a minute, you have to teach them their faith before you can use apologetics on them, because they don't even really know Islam. So again, it's just a good principle that get to know people and then use the appropriate tool at your disposal to convince them of the truth of Christianity. And very often you will find that apologetics is that helpful tool, but don't start thinking this is what I got to use first. You understand who you're dealing with and what they actually think and believe before you just start opening up, quoting from, I don't have enough faith to be an atheist or whatever.
Yeah, because that applies to atheists too, right? Like, I think initially when I started getting into apologetics, I found out somebody didn't believe in God. It was like, you're literally Nietzsche, and it's like, no, they're not. They're not Richard Dawkins. They're not, anyone else. They're just themselves, and they have their own set of beliefs. And all of us hold together a web of inconsistent beliefs to some extent. We don't realize it. We don't realize the ways that our beliefs may contradict each other or may be inconsistent. But you have to discover that through conversation to say, okay, so you say you're an atheist. Let me throw out some things that atheists commonly believe. You tell me whether you agree or disagree with them, or just listen to them, ask them what they believe, and get into that conversation.
If I could just add one thing, I think in addition to everything they just said, I think one of the things that many Muslims, well, I say that Muslims don't have, is the intimacy with God that Christians have, the relationship aspect. God is loving because he says so, or, God is good because these are things that are said. He's merciful, he's forgiving, but these aren't necessarily demonstrations to the extent that we have in Jesus, where God actually comes and demonstrates forgiveness and mercy and gentleness and love and these kind of things. And I think one of the things that can be really helpful is to, in your conversations, help create a picture of God that is beautiful, that is one that is close, that is one that desires you. Like, that heaven isn't just about getting there to avoid being in hell. It's not why you go there. You go there so that you can experience closely the most perfect, most all good being that's ever existed. Like, that you get to experience that being for all of eternity. And so heaven for the Christian is to be with God, whereas that's not necessarily something that's even guaranteed within Islam, that paradise, God would even be there. So, I mean, to be able to talk about, to demonstrate, to almost to see if you can create a longing for that, the longing for that, that desire to have God be close. Christianity starts with God close, Adam and Eve in the garden, and God is close, and it ends that way as well. And that's kind of what makes, I think, Christianity unique in that way, is that intimacy. And that's something I would focus on with them.
Yeah. That's good. I like that cultural apologetics approach, not just showing that Christianity is true, but that we should want it to be true, that it's good and it's beautiful as well. We have an interesting question here about the ministry itself, which is why did they change the name? I liked C.S. Lewis Society. There are hundreds of apologetics channels. And thank you for this question. I couldn't agree more myself. But no, I'm just kidding. Mike, as the president, as the man who did
this to us. No.
why don't you answer this question?
Y'all are both losers. What is wrong with you? Yeah, no, it's a great question. I love the question. And I love C.S. Lewis. Some of my earliest memories, or fondest memories, not earliest, but as a child, I read Chronicles of Narnia, fell in love with it. And I remember one day walking through my parents' bedroom, and on my mom's nightstand was another book by C.S. Lewis. And I go, what? I felt like she was holding out on me. I was like, what is this? And I might have been a teenager, but not much, not very old. And my mom, who's very clever, she said, oh, you wouldn't be interested in that. That's for grown-ups. So smart. I was like, wow. Forget you. And so I grabbed it and read it and didn't understand any of it. so she wasn't wrong in that sense. But this is just a good gift from my parents, as they were cultivated a love of reading in the house for me. Maybe not for my brother, who's kind of a brute, but I'm kidding, Brian.
Which book was it? Was it the critique of medieval literature?
No, it was Mere Christianity. Oh, okay, and so, okay. but years later, then when I started to get interested in things like apologetics, that I knew of the book, of course, knew of C.S. Lewis, and so I grabbed Mere Christianity and I read, and I was like, man, I didn't know Christians could talk like this, or think like this, or write like this, and so it was a very powerful and meaningful experience for me. So the reason for the name change doesn't have anything to do with we didn't like C.S. Lewis. And in fact, we haven't gotten rid of the C.S. Lewis Society. We're repositioning it as a place for vocational friendship in the spirit of the Inklings. And I can elaborate more on that at another time. But the real reason for this was when I was hired, what I began to see was that the work that predated me, started by Tom and then others like Dave Engelhardt coming along, they were building an apologetics ministry that was beginning to go beyond the scope of what the name C.S. Lewis would represent. For example, we've started a youth discipleship initiative called 7x7 Conversations. And though like C.S. Lewis as a follower of Jesus would be committed to discipleship, there's nothing that's like a straight line from C.S. Lewis to youth discipleship. You don't go, when you hear about C.S. Lewis, you go, oh, you must be a ministry that's doing youth discipleship, aren't you? And so there's not a straight line there. So the scope of the ministry as it's continuing to grow is better supported by a name more broadly like Apologetics Inc. And one of the things that I discovered when I was hired was this is actually what we've always been. Back in the early 2000s, Dr. Tom incorporated the ministry under the name Apologetics Inc., and it was doing business as the C.S. Lewis Society ever since. Also in the late 90s, Dr. Tom grabbed the domain apologetics.org. So as this ministry began to grow and expand and become a platform to support a growing number of apologetic initiatives, it made sense to go with a name that more broadly can or adequately support, if you will, those growing initiatives. And another simple reason is there are, to the point, there's actually a lot of other ministries that use the name C.S. Lewis. It's kind of a crowded space, and regularly our work was confused with other C.S. Lewis, this, that, or the other, or they would just misjudge the nature of our work. They go, oh, you must be, so what are you, like, committed to Lewis's books? And are you like a book club kind of thing? It's like, well, no, we C.S. Lewis's name was kind of like a namesake that was a representative of how we went about apologetics. So moving forward in the growth of this ministry, for those reasons and a couple of others, it made sense to us all. To us all, not just me. Thank you, Matthew and Alycia.
It did make sense. Okay, it made sense.
I love the name change.
Yeah, it's good.
So hopefully that answered that question, and I'm always glad to have more nuanced or longer discussions with folks. So just hit me up if you got more
Yeah,
questions.
we all love C.S. Lewis, and in my book, he is the GOAT of all apologists. So, thank you for this question. Following up on the earlier discussion around Islam, we've got a great question here again from Felix. What do you suggest to those who are interested to share the gospel among Muslims but don't know how to start? And I'm just going to repeat what I said earlier, which is that people from Eastern cultures or Middle Eastern cultures value hospitality. And so if you haven't invited them over for a meal, if you haven't had that kind of conversation with them, that's a great place to start, to have that kind of gospel conversation, to build relationship, to build a friendship with that person. That's a great way to get going. Do you guys have anything else to add to that, or is that maybe sufficient for that question?
No, I mean, I was going to say the same thing. Hospitality, just be friends. Like sometimes I think we want to come up with like a system or what's like the true way to win somebody. And I just think just be friends with people. And I just know I'm friends who aren't Christians. And then all of a sudden randomly they'll be like, oh yeah, you go to church. What do you guys think of this? Like they just start asking because they know about you. And it's why I love having diversity of friends. So yeah, just being friends with them. Matthew is spot on with the hospitality thing. And someone who's a Muslim is going back to like the Hindu question and even some of the stuff that Mike said about feeling open to ask questions. Someone who's a Muslim is going to probably be open to talking about God. You know, what do you believe and all these kind of things? They're not ashamed. That's one thing they definitely can't be. So, you know, they're not going to be ashamed or they'll be open to talking with you. But also just be a friend of somebody. You don't have to look at them or concerned like, how do I say this the right way? Or how do I say this the right way? And so, yeah, you can relieve yourself of that stress.
That's great. Yeah, I think I was surprised to hear that just in Nabil's book and in my own experience as I've talked to Muslims. There's an assumption that we sometimes have that Muslims wouldn't want to talk about their faith or they don't want to have those kinds of conversations. And exactly the opposite is true. Many Muslims especially want to talk about God. They actually care. They want to have that conversation. Of course, a gentle and respectful conversation, but they want to have that discussion.
Yeah.
Any books or resources you guys would recommend? Like Nabil Seeking Allah, Finding Jesus. What else do you guys got? Any other kind of go-to resources on that?
Yeah, I mean that's the go-to first book you should read on the subject. It's one of the greatest books of all time, in my opinion, and because it tells you not only some apologetics around the subject of Islam, but it shares a story of Nabil's life and what it was like growing up in a very loving Muslim home, and it helps you to actually love Muslims. So I would absolutely recommend starting there. A lot of people don't know. Well, so Nabil passed away in 2017, actually just a couple days ago, 6 years ago, and so some people don't know that he wrote Seeking Allah, Finding Jesus. That was his well-known bestseller book, but he actually wrote 2 more books before he passed away. He wrote one called Answering Jihad, which is all around the question of jihad, all around the question of Islam and violence and how should we understand that. And then he also wrote a book called No God But One, Allah or Jesus, which is a kind of a deep dive into some of the issues of Islam versus Christianity, the evidence claims around both of those. So those are all 3 great resources and books to get started on that. Great. We've got another question here, and maybe this might be the last question, or we might have one more after this one. So we've got a question here from a 7th grader. How do I help someone who is struggling to know if they are a boy or a girl?
So I can jump in here and I will do my best to condense a almost 2-hour talk into a very short answer for you all, because this transgender topic is a big deal, right? And it's something that I think I would think if we were to take a poll of people that had texted in or that are on this particular live stream, they would know somebody, whether it's a family member, a friend, a classmate, a coworker, somebody who identifies or somebody that's close to a friend or something identifies as trans. So a couple things. Number one, I think just give you a little bit of background on this. Just understand that when somebody says that they're transgender, they are acknowledging that their biology exists. You know, they were maybe they would say assigned a boy or girl at birth. But the issue is that they would say that they don't, what they are experiencing in terms of their life, their feelings, their emotions, the things that they like to do, that this is actually the opposite sex. So we'll use me as an example, born biologically female, but I feel like a boy because I like sports, or because I like math, or I don't like Barbie dolls or something like that. And so essentially what happens is you begin to have these feelings that you identify with the other sex. And so therefore you must have been born in the wrong body. Like the biology, the physical body must have gotten it wrong. And there's a lot of various reasons why somebody comes to this conclusion. We know that the social media influences are really large, and that social media has played a massive, massive role in impacting how people see themselves. We also know that people struggle oftentimes even before they identify as transgender. They often struggle with a depression or anxiety, ADHD, autism. So these are already existing conditions that are there even before they identify. And so when they're already kind of feeling bad, kind of about maybe who they are, and then social media tells them you'll be happy if you change, you'll be happy if you transition, then that gives people reason to want to change, so that they actually feel like that they want to be happy. For some young girls, they don't want to be girls. Maybe they've been abused in the past, and if they were a boy, then they wouldn't be abused. Maybe they're really a lesbian, and they don't want to be a lesbian. So if they transition to a man, then there'll be a man who's attracted to women, and they're not lesbian anymore. So there's a variety of things that are at play here. So just a little bit of background as you're kind of addressing this, to kind of understand where somebody might be at before you even speak with them in regards to that. So something I would say to somebody who is considering trying to figure out if they're a boy or girl. Number one, I think, it's almost as if God in his infinite wisdom somehow knew that we would struggle 2000, or not in 2000, thousands of years after the book of Genesis was written, where, knowing that we would struggle with being male or female. And so right in the very first book of the Bible, in Genesis chapter 1, it helps us to know what our male and femaleness actually is. And it's important because God is the creator, can tell us about the creation. He can tell us about what he has created us to be. And that is important. And so in Genesis chapter 1, it says, in the image of God, he made them, male and female. He made them. In the image of God, he created them, in the image of God, he made them, male and female, he created them. And that created them is really important. I think I butchered that verse a bit, but it's really that final part where it says male and female who created them is the key thing, because that created is actually talking about how they were shaped or how they were formed. In other words, this is a physical description. We are physically shaped or formed male or female. And that helps us to know that even though our feelings are real and they're really telling us that this particular thing is true, that bit of guidance can help us actually know what actual truth is. Because it can be so confusing. Like just life today can just be confusing. And there's so many things that we're struggling to understand. I mean, look at some of these really good questions that you all have asked. Like some of these things, politics and Israel and Islam and Hinduism. I mean, some of these things can just be so challenging. And so I'm thankful that we have this bit of clarity to help us as we're trying to figure out who we are, that this can help us to know. But even still, that doesn't mean the feelings are going to go away, right? Our feelings are there and they are very real. So here's something I would encourage you with. Number one, if you are feeling that you are maybe transgender, or you belong to the opposite gender, I would encourage you to get off social media. I would encourage you to just take a break from it for several months. Even just 1 month will be a difference, but take a break for several months, and maybe even consider changing your friend groups or changing your school. And I know that sounds crazy, but what we are finding is that there's patterns to what's happening. And oftentimes it has to do with your peers and your relationships and your friendships. So especially when it comes to young girls, they're very influenced by other girls and very influenced by things around them. And so I would say, get off social media. It will clear your head like you've never imagined. The links between depression and anxiety and social media are there. We know the studies are out. And we also know that social media influences people wanting to be trans. We know that because people who have transitioned have told us that that was what tipped them over and what was influential for them. So I'd encourage you to, leave social media, change your friends groups, excuse me, and change schools even if you have to. But please don't do any kind of medications or surgeries or anything. And this is why. What the studies show is that by the time you are in your mid-20s, you will be comfortable with who you are. In other words, that gender dysphoria for most people will dissipate once they hit kind of like their mid-20s. And if we've done any permanent changes when we were young, then those are, if we've done any medications, when we were young, those changes are permanent and they can't be reversed. And so I would say wait it out, and you will like yourself. You will kind of come into agreement with the biology and the feelings. And finally, I'll just say, understand that while our feelings are real and valid, they don't always convey truth. And just a really simple example is a lot of women like me are scared of spiders, right? We see a spider and we like freak out, right? Like, oh my goodness, what am I do? Right. And your body like tenses up. Like the thing is 8 feet from you, Alycia. You are not in mortal danger. Like you could walk faster than the spider. My body's like, be scared, alert. And it's like my feelings of fear over that bug is real, but they are telling me to act in a way that I shouldn't, like almost like it's it's like having me overreact to what's going on. They're not conveying truth. The truth is I don't have to be scared. I've got nothing to be scared about. I'm not in danger. Even though my feelings are saying, Mayday, 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 they're actually wrong here. And there's times when our feelings are wrong. And so I know these are some of the things I think I would say to somebody who is really struggling, whether or not they're a boy or a girl, is just keep in mind that your feelings don't always convey truth. Wait it out. You're most likely going to like yourself in your 20s. If you can get help for any of the mental health things that are going on, that would be very important. Don't take any medications or anything that makes permanent changes to your body. And please let your creator give you clarity in the confusion of your mind as to who you are. He knows more than you. He was able to make you, and you can trust him that he can tell you whether or not you're a boy or a girl.
Yeah, really good, Alycia. And again, if you're in Atlanta in early November, come hear Alycia on this topic at Pinecrest Church, my home church. Just one quick point, because Alycia did so good on that point. One of the ways you can help your friend is by just being there for them and giving them somebody that will wait this out with them, and to ask them questions like, are you sure? Because, and the reason like the, are you sure? And I'm here to walk alongside you through this is important, because to Alicia's point, a lot of people are finding an online community that's exerting an awful lot of pressure on this young person, telling them this is what's wrong with you and this is the solution. And go listen to the story of Chloe Cole. And this will explain the story Alycia and I are telling. And this would be, so if you have a friend that's struggling with this, that'd be something to be helpful to them, is like, hey, make sure you hear from people that have been through this, all the way through this, and listen to their stories. Because Chloe Cole tells the story that when she was a young girl around age 12, started to suffer from gender dysphoria. And she tells a horrible story, a tragic story of how she found a community. She felt a certain pressure and acceptance at the same time, too, to go a certain route. There was a medical community that did not ask any questions, just gave pills and prescribed treatment. She ended up with a double mastectomy, but by the age of 16, she regretted it all. And now she tells the story of what it's like to live with a scarred body and the emotional toll that took. So for someone that's considering going down this path, invite them to say, hey, why don't you listen to stories of people that have stories of regret as you are thinking about this and waiting this out. This is a big decision. Do not rush ahead on this. And that could be, you could be the one person in their life giving them kind of it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. Let's go a little bit slow. Let's listen to what this person, their experience. And And that's important because a lot of times Christians, or not just Christians, but all people feel the pressure of, I got to say the right thing right now to fix this.
Hmm.
And for so many issues, you got to play a little bit of a longer game here.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. And just to add on then, the Jordan Peterson and Chloe Cole, if you YouTube Jordan Peterson,
Yeah,
Chloe
it's
Cole,
good.
you'll watch, I think it's like a 2-hour YouTube
Yeah.
video.
Yeah.
Trust me, it is so worth your time. You'll see Jordan Peterson as a therapist, as a counselor, as a psychologist, explaining to her why she had the feelings and what the proper responses should have been from a counseling perspective when she was 12 years old. And so I would strongly encourage you to just watch that Jordan Peterson, Chloe Cole interview.
I love both of what you guys have said there. And I just would add that, as Christians, we want to help people to think through things from a Christian perspective. And so I think it's really good to think through the dangers involved in these things, to think through the underlying psychological conditions that can be there, but also to tell somebody, that Jesus loves them, that that God has made them, that they are fearfully and wonderfully made in the image of God, that God doesn't make mistakes when he designs us, and that the way that they feel doesn't define who they are. They're defined who they are because of their imageness, because of they're made in the image of God. And so I think just to bring the Christian perspective in, to be concerned that somebody actually understands that, even more than the very, very, very important question of whether or not they should identify as a different gender or to transition. Those are very important questions, but the most important question is: do you know Jesus? Do you have a relationship with him? Do you obey his word? Do you see the Bible as authoritative over your life? Because if you do those things, it can help to inform the way that you're thinking about your body, the way that you're thinking about things like that. So I think that's just important to keep in mind as well. We've got a one more comment here, or one more question. Felix says, how can I contact you? And the answer is, number one, you can go to our website, apologetics.org. We have a contact form there you can continue to ask questions on there or contact us on there. And as well, we're going to do more of these kinds of events in the future. This is not our last one. It's our first Ask an Apologist night. And we want this to be a new tradition of offering a chance to grow together, to seek the truth together, and to ask our questions together. So
but before then, here's Matthew's contact information. So let it come into focus, and then
thank you so much for that. Wow, amazing. Wow. Well, great, guys. Thank you so much for your participation, your questions tonight. I think probably the best comment of the night here. Awesome answers. I mean, minus Mike. I just think that's just a great summary of the night tonight. I wasn't going to show that, but
But you had to,
Mike,
because it's true. We speak truth.
Yeah,
thank you,
Alycia and
Echo.
I did a great job. So anyway, thank you guys just for your honest, open questions and for your discussion. Thank you genuinely, Mike and Alycia, for the ways that you guys have answered this question. And be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can visit our website by going to apologetics.org, or you can scan the QR code there. Like us on Facebook. We have an Instagram page as well. We would love to continue to have this conversation with you as we seek to demonstrate the truth, beauty, and goodness of the gospel. And with that, have a great night, everyone.